You go to McDonald's, you get a cylinder. You go to Dos Coyotes, you get a cylinder. You go to Burger King, you get a cylinder. There's no glaze line. It doesn't look like a trim bottom. You get plastic cup. You get cheap, is what you get. You put a line at the bottom of that. Oh. Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? Today we're going to be talking about the importance of lines and what a simple line can do for you and your ceramic artwork, especially for functional ceramic artwork. Listen, hear me out. It sounds crazy. The whole line thing sounds crazy, because I'm literally going to teach you in this episode where and how to put one line in your artwork and how it can help you for a bunch of different things. Now, there are tons of different ways in which you can use carvings or even one simple line in the way I'm going to show you today to make your stuff look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing or a little bit more functionally ergonomic, a bunch of different stuff. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about 3 main ways in which you can change your artwork up for the better just by using a simple line. Just as a warning to any new subscribers out there, we're not going to be going over how to do any shapes. The shapes are for my beginner playlist where you learn how to make most of the shapes you're going to find in the ceramic art world as a base. So in today's episode, we're going to be working with a mug, so I'm just going to make a mug and we're going to get started. As I said, there are 3 main ways in this episode that I'm going to show you how to work with a simple line inside of your ceramic artwork. The first way is just one simple line at either the top or the middle of your work while you're either trimming or crafting your ceramic artwork, like this. This little addition right here will immediately separate the rest of the super basic cylinder mugs that you see out in the world from your work. Your work is the only one, probably in class, that has this very special line in it. It works on a bunch of different levels actually, and it has more to do with the human eye than anything else. Number 1, your eyes are probably now separating the top from the bottom as separate entities. You can very easily look at the piece like this and see it as a very straight cylinder cup, or you can see this part down here, which is flanged out a little bit more and has more of a round to it right here. You can also very easily now separate the 2 different bodies into 2 different types of styles if you feel like it. For example, for stylistic purposes, I can now morph one part of the mug or one part of the cylinder and make it look way more different from the other parts, all while not affecting the rest of the other parts of the cylinder, or at least the ceramic artwork. This makes a world of difference when you're making a couple different things. I could make the entire thing this form, but then I would simply be making an egg form out of this mug. Putting one simple line is a fantastic way to separate not only your work, but your glaze as well. And I usually put them at either the bottom, the middle, or the top. And I do it for a bunch of different reasons. In fact, I don't know if many of you noticed this, but my rib is actually modified in a very specific way. My rib usually has this part rounded out, just like this part is right here, but I cut mine off with a pair of scissors just so that I can make bottoms look a little bit more clean, and I can also make lines inside of my work. Since the eye moves in 3s, it's much easier for me to do something like this. And now I have something that's just a bit more interesting to the human eye than a regular old cylinder. It sounds strange, it really does, but especially when you're a new student, you don't understand the power of a line until you've made one and actually glazed your work. This is a prime example. For beginner students, they're probably pouring their little hearts out learning how to center and trying to make bowls, but all of them are making the same bowls over and over and over again. They probably don't understand the effect that a glaze even has on a simple line, because technically this line is texture and the glaze will affect that. So just putting something like one simple line at the bottom of your bowl is immediately going to artistically differentiate your bowl from the rest of the other classwork. It makes it look much nicer, even though it is just a very simple technique. The thing that I personally like about it is that you can do it while you're throwing, or when you turn your stuff upside down and you trim it, you can also get your trim tools and do the same exact thing while placing it anywhere you want. Hey, you see this? You see this right here? This is where I draw the line. I'm so sorry. Please don't unsubscribe. We're not gonna save this. No, we ain't gonna save this. The second way that you can use a basic line is actually probably something that you've seen before. I've in fact talked about this before on my YouTube channel, but instead of calling it a foot line, I called it a glaze line. A glaze line is something that old school potters used to use all the time whenever they didn't want their glaze to run a little too much. You see, technically speaking, whenever you put a line on your pot, you're creating texture. This texture is just extra things the glaze has to run over. And technically speaking, whenever you put a pot with glaze inside the glaze load, your glaze technically runs. And most potters say glaze runs whenever it's runny, but technically speaking, even on a microscopic level, the glaze will technically run and be affected by gravity. This means that it goes from the top of your pot down to the bottom of your pot. You can see this very easily in this mug right here. The glaze looked very normal when I put it on, but now you can see that it started to drip and run a tiny bit. A glaze line is a simple line at the very bottom of your mug, which counts as extra texture, that the glaze has to run over and get through before it gets to the bottom of your kiln shelf and ruins your kiln shelves. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't save your shelf, it's not like a godsend, but you'll most likely see lots of potters use a base and then overglaze the top of their mugs to make them drippy, kind of like this a little bit. Put a glaze line right down here. This glaze line is meant to act as kind of an extra moat to protect the glaze from going too far down, just as a little extra layer of protection. This means that technically speaking, the more texture you have on a pot, the more the glaze has to run over that space in order for it to run onto your kiln shelves. Potters figured this out over time and just started putting little lines at the bottom of their pots in order for it to get in the way of the glaze that might inevitably run onto the shelves. So for those of us who like to make mugs in this fashion and overglaze our tops, a lot of us will just make a mug and either trim or put a very simple line right at the bottom of our mugs. Just like this. Potter tip! As I said earlier, this is called a glaze line. You notice it in a bunch of people's work. This is technically what I call a glaze line, and although it is a glaze line for the purposes that I told you, there are some circles of pottery that call it a foot line, because you can technically make it look like your pottery has a foot without trimming the bottom of your pot and giving it an actual foot. This is a heavily used technique in the production potter world. Anyone who you know that most likely pumps out hundreds and hundreds of mugs every single month most likely doesn't trim their bottoms because it takes about double the time as it would to actually throw a pot. So what they do is they even out for doing this technique right here. There's even little tools that help you do this. So what many of them do is they get a tool that looks just like this, essentially a little foot maker, and they'll do one of these little tricks. What I just did to this pot here is I made it look like it has a foot, but I didn't trim it. When you make hundreds of mugs every single month, you still have to keep up production for your bottom line while also making it look like you put the time and effort into your craft and kind of make it look like you still care about your product. That handcrafted look. So over time, production potters have kind of figured out that a lot of people like the look of handmade work, to make it look like you put a little bit more work into your pot. People aren't buying straight cylinders because it looks like you just threw a form ticket off the wheel. So what do? They made a tool called a foot maker, or they put a line at the very bottom of their piece to make it look like the piece has a foot. Although technically speaking, I now don't have to turn this around at all. I can now very easily just take this directly off of my wheel head and it will still look like it has a handcrafted foot to it. All I have to do is attach the handle, and there you go. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. And from the point of view of a customer, this now looks like it actually has a trimmed, or at least somebody put effort into putting a foot at the bottom of this pot. Even though, all I did was like put a literal line at the bottom of my pot. The third and probably least functional, but the coolest way you can use these lines. Oh wait, hold on. It's just a cylinder right now. I gotta make it look handmade. Yeah, see, now it's fancy. Now I'm an artist. The third and least functional, but probably the coolest way you can use lines is by simply taking either the edge of your metal rib, or you can even use your potter's knife, whatever have you, something sharp, but don't use a pin tool. You're just gonna poke through your clay. To let your wheel spin very slowly and rhythmically go up and down while putting one line into your pottery. This was probably the coolest thing that I ever experienced when the TA came around when I was first learning ceramic artwork as a beginner. All he did was let the cylinder go, got my rib, and pulled out one of these. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I was like, oh my god, I have to learn to do that. And then he made another mug and showed me the same exact technique and just moved the tempo around a little bit. Watch. It's the same exact thing we just did while moving up and down, letting the wheel go very slowly, and just letting the wheel do its work. But now it's an entirely different piece. we ain't keeping that either. You're crazy if you think we're keeping that. Hey Deborah, you gonna trim them pots? Nah, I ain't gonna trim them pots. I got one of these. And there you have it. Now you have a couple more techniques to help you in your ceramic art journey. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me. Hopefully that helps some of you control your stuff. I know there's a couple of potters out there who are like, man, my glaze is really runny, but I love this glaze. I just want a little bit more wiggle room. And some of these techniques are gonna help you out. Or there's some people out there who are like, I just don't have time to sit down and trim all of my work all the time. My work dries out before I get to trim its bottoms, and now you can still have that handcrafted look while not trimming your bottoms. Even though I don't advocate for not trimming your bottoms, I be trimming my bottoms, you best believe. But my job here is to give you the tools to express yourself artistically how you want to, not to tell you exactly what to do. This was definitely more of an intermediate video where I explained some of the usages of lines instead of just saying, hey, make a line, it does this one thing. But hopefully it'll help you identify some of the things in the ceramic art world, so if you ever see some technique like this, you know exactly what it is and why the potter did it. But thank you, Dirty Potters, for watching. Remember to click all the buttons so my YouTube overlords are happy, and I will see you, Dirty Potters, next week.
Thank you for your patronage.
But it looks like I trimmed that pot, right? Looks like it. I didn't do it though.